Hey you guys, welcome back to another episode of Becoming Secure. This is your host, Emily, dating and relationship coach, specializing in all things attachment. And I'm really excited for today's episode. Um, as you probably can see from the title, unless I change it to something else between recording and posting, this is how to love your anxiety, which you might have some mixed feelings about. You might be confused by that. You might be like, Emily, what the heck are you on? What are you talking about? Like tolerate, maybe. Love, I don't know. It seems pretty far-fetched. So I'm excited to dive into this today with you and just talk about some different ways to kind of view anxiety than how you probably have been viewing it, as well as some experiences I've had and that clients of mine have had in this area. So, when you have anxious attachment, or maybe some of those core anxious wounds, those anxious core wounds, let me try that again, even though you're maybe a fearful avoidant because they have the avoidant and the anxious sides of their attachment, or you just have anxiety in general. A lot of dismissive avoidants tend to have a low level of anxiety that they don't even realize is there until they start to come back into their bodies. So, whatever camp that you fall into, whatever your experience with anxiety looks like, it can be easy to feel like your body is out to get you when you are having these moments of anxiety or panic. It can feel like you are super out of control in your life and in your relationships because of the anxiety you're experiencing. And it can also feel like the anxiety is the problem, like it is the enemy, and life would be better and you would feel normal in relationships if you just didn't have it. And so this kind of creates a dynamic where it's like you versus your anxiety, you against your anxiety, again, making it the enemy, kind of othering it. And there's this resistance to the anxiety when it does come up, or even a sense of hopelessness and resignation that things are just going to be this way and you can't do much about it. And again, it's like that your anxiety is the problem, or it is the inconvenience in your life. And this is something that a lot of my clients feel, in fact, probably all of them feel when they first start working with me. And usually they've tried a lot of things on their journey, whether that's just with anxious attachment or anxiety in general, whether therapy, counseling, or I remember one client had even been doing like support groups for ADHD, which all of that is kind of related to a dysregulated nervous system. So it's kind of like different pieces or different sides of the same coin. And so a lot of different attempts to kind of work with this, and it can sort of feel like um you're playing whack-a-mole, where like, let me try this, nope, that didn't work, let me try this, nope, that didn't work, let me try this. And there can be some tools and some practices that can be helpful in sort of managing it, but they don't always give you the perspective shifts that are needed, and they often don't really address the underlying dysregulation that's the root of all the anxiety. So I find that when clients do start working with me, they, for the first time, feel like they have a totally different relationship to their anxiety, and that they experience like a significant decrease in their anxiety pretty quickly. But this episode that I am going to kind of dive into today was actually inspired by a conversation that happened on a group call about a year ago. So I'm going to read you guys the post, and I think I sent it out as an email to my list as well, that I wrote about this conversation that we had. And then I'm going to add some more nuance to this conversation as well. So I titled this post originally, Your Anxiety Isn't the Problem. Every other Sunday, my one on one clients and alumni gather for our women's circle. And this past Sunday, we had a beautiful conversation about learning to love your anxiety. Two alumni shared about how changing their perspective on their anxiety has been a huge part of successfully managing it and not letting it run their relationships. But can you actually learn to love your anxiety, and how? It begins with understanding why you have anxiety in the first place. Its entire purpose is to keep you safe. When your heart's racing, your chest feels tight, your stomach drops, it's actually your body trying to tell you that you're in danger, that you're not safe. based on your past experiences, whether that's ones you can remember or ones that you can't, where you didn't feel safe. Your anxiety is just trying to protect you. That's it. And if you could envision your anxiety as a person, perhaps a younger version of you, who's always looking out for you, who always has your back, who always wants what's best for you, how would that change things for you? How could you not love her? Rather than resisting her or ignoring her, what if you could acknowledge her and how she's trying to help you? And then remind her that what you're experiencing now isn't the same thing as the abandonment or inconsistency or unavailability that you felt growing up. You're grown now. Even though the danger feels big and scary, you've got her. It's not like before. And when you learn how to view your anxiety differently and develop the nervous system and emotional regulation skills to handle your triggers with ease, you realize that anxiety is not something to fear or hate. She's just a scared child who needs your help. So, one of the biggest problems that I see with clients is that they sort of other their anxiety, right? Or make it the enemy, or make it mean that, you're broken or there's something wrong with you. And then when we start to work together and they learn more about the nervous system and they learn how to self-soothe, they stop feeling that as much. So I want to add some more nuance, some more education to this post that I had written. And so a couple big shifts from that post and that are important to have, generally speaking, are that, your anxiety is not the problem. It's actually the symptom of something deeper going on, and that your anxiety makes sense. That it doesn't mean that you're broken or there's something wrong. It's just that your nervous system is signaling something to you. And sometimes our wires can be a little bit crossed due to the dysregulation. But again, that's even, if there is sign kind of I'm anxious in the moment where it feels like I actually shouldn't be, that is just showing us that that is a symptom of the dysregulation. And the dysregulation is something that we can work with. And so I want to give you guys a little piece of nervous system education on this topic through sharing an analogy that I actually learned from Irene Lyon, who is an incredible voice in the world of nervous system health and trauma healing. I've done a couple of her programs. She is incredible. And this analogy that I want to introduce you to, that I learned from her, is one of beach balls and swimming pools. So if you imagine that your nervous system and your tissues, your bones, your joints, your organs, we actually have multiple nervous systems. So all the nervous systems, all of your body is the swimming pool. Okay, so just kind of imagine that you are the swimming pool. And then all of your stressors, so this is your childhood trauma, your chronic stressors in your go, go, go day-to-day life, the car accidents that you've been through, maybe the really bad relationships you've had where you were in a state of like chronic anxiety because you were really unsafe with that person, or maybe it's a really bad boss. I had one client who that was a significant experience in her life where she had a very, very bad boss for a period of time, and it was like a whole thing. And she, experienced like panic attacks during that time. So all those different stressors are the beach balls in the swimming pool, and we can accumulate different beach balls over time. And, sometimes they leave, sometimes more come in. So when we have a lot of beach balls or a very small swimming pool, or both, or we just don't have enough space in the swimming pool for all of the beach balls, then we will start to experience symptoms, whether that is anxiety or panic, or even freeze and shut down on the other end of the spectrum. And so our options are basically to grow our swimming pool, which is building our capacity, or to remove some of the beach balls through processing some of those traumas, or both. And so, to give you an example of a recent experience I've had, I was actually in a car accident in July. So, that was, let me see, July, August, September, October, November. Okay, so probably about four, maybe 4.5 months ago. And it was relatively minor. Our airbags didn't even deploy, but it still sent me into very intense activation very quickly, right? Like you're okay 1 minute, and then like the next, 3 seconds later, you have this intense full body like anxiety, adrenaline, everything's kicking in. You're in survival mode in that moment. So it's like literally from, 0 to 100 super quickly. And so now in the months that have followed, and this didn't happen right away, actually, I think it took maybe a month and a half for me to start noticing these things. I started experiencing a bit more anxiety in general. And I've even had moments in the last month where if a panic attack is a 10, I was at like an 8 or a 9. And there was one experience where I very quickly realized I was starting to go into panic, and because of like the tools that I had and because of just the capacity that I've built where I could recognize, okay, like all that's happening is I'm experiencing panic, and I was able to do things to kind of ground myself and able to work on being with the sensation and, not letting it totally kind of overtake me. So it's the whole thing of like, can I feel what's happening without fearing what's happening? And so I was able to get myself to kind of come back down after a few minutes. And then, I probably hung out at like a level 5 or 6 of that activation for maybe an hour or so, and maybe not an hour, maybe like 30 minutes, and then kind of went on a walk and, chatted with a friend, co-regulated a little bit. And so while I could be frustrated that these things are starting to happen and think of it as like an inconvenience, I actually feel like it's a blessing. Because when we have symptoms, we're in a better place than when we have suppression, which is something that we get so wrong in Western medicine, where we make the symptom the enemy and like it's the problem, rather than seeing it as communication about what's going on. And so then when we suppress what we're feeling or, what that symptom is, that suppression leads to further chronic issues. So leads to chronic disease, leads to weakened immune system. It can lead to just different symptoms popping up in other places because we're trying to silence what our body is telling us. And then the more we silence something, eventually the louder it will get until we actually listen. But if we actually got curious about the symptoms and tried to understand what they were communicating with us, what our body needs, then we start to feel less at war with our bodies, and we can become more empowered and more compassionate, as it pertains to our health and our bodies and the symptoms that are coming up. And I say this not as, someone who never experiences symptoms, who just has like, like a perfectly like amazing, health history. I don't. I have Hashimoto's hypothyroid, and I try not to like take that diagnosis on as a label or an identity. Um, and, with my personal like values, I have really taken a natural route to working with that and to treating with that. Right now, I'm not on any medication for it, and no judgment towards you if you are. I have found that for me, finding different things naturally and holistic and lifestyle wise to support myself in this area has been the best thing for me. And that's led to a lot of research and, basically becoming my own doctor. And, I will have friends who text me about like all their different random health questions. And, if I don't know the answer, I know a resource I can send them to because I have just done so much research on my own health journey. And so I say all this to say that I understand what it's like to have days and moments where you just feel like super exhausted and you can't get out of bed and don't feel like you can do a whole lot. And I also understand what it's like to have times where you are feeling an intense panic. And it can be challenging and it can be frustrating But I also want you to know that like where I'm at in my life right now is not perfect health wise, but I do feel a lot of like peace about the symptoms that come up. And I actually feel really grateful that my body is expressing symptoms. Because again, when it expresses symptoms, that actually means that it is in like a strong enough state to communicate what is going on. And when we have a lack of symptoms due to like suppression, then that is where our chronic issues get worse. So I try to take the perspective that I'm actually so grateful that my body is communicating with me. That means that I can tend to it. I can try to listen to it. I can work on being a better caretaker of myself and practicing more gentleness, practicing, meeting my needs and figuring out like what do I need and just building more of this relationship with my body. And so as I, continue to work through some of the anxiety and the panic that have kind of set in post my car accident, I'm trusting that continuing to be connected to myself and to build the capacity to feel what I'm feeling and to not let myself be totally overwhelmed by it, that these things are going to work themselves out. And maybe that means processing things from the car accident in like a more somatic way. Or maybe that means that there are other things that are going to come up and come out, and that will create a bit more space in my swimming pool. It's the whole thing where it doesn't have to be one specific ball that like pops out and creates more space. Sometimes it's a different one than you expected. And as I have kind of been processing some of these moments where I felt like intense triggers recently, I found that there have been things that are so completely unrelated to the car accident, but it just so happens that like that's what's accessible to me right now to work on and move through. And when I think back on, two of those moments where I've gone into a panic and hit like a level 9 or level 8 of activation, I actually see my increased sensitivity to these things as a blessing because it's allowing me to pause and not neglect myself. It's helping me to recognize situations that really do feel like a no, where I'm about to self-abandon, I'm about to cross my own boundary, or moments where I just need to speak up for my needs. And I probably would have been someone who didn't do that in the past. And I've done a lot of work around this area, so I do find that it's very accessible for me to just communicate like, hey, can we actually do this instead? Or hey, would you mind if we do this? For example, when I had that like really almost full-blown panic attack, one of the things that I noticed, and it was so bizarre, which not really given what I know, but there was a movie that had a bit of, it was literally Batman, you guys, one of the Batman movies, and it was whatever one has Bane in it. And just some of the violence that was happening, I wasn't even really watching. I was like in the kitchen, preparing some food. We had some friends coming over soon, and my roommate's boyfriend was watching this on the TV as we were kind of, preparing for our little like gathering. And I noticed that I was feeling this like anxiety, this like sensation kind of building like in the bottom part of my rib cage. And it was like I could tell my breathing was a little off, and it was just something, it started then. And well, it really probably started, things were happening earlier in the day. Like I hadn't eaten enough. It had been a very go, go, go morning. And so there were probably things that already were starting before that. And then I really started to notice it with this TV. And then some more things happened a little bit after that. And I was like, oh my gosh, here we are. Okay. And so I was able to just communicate like, hey, this is a little strange. But would you mind like switching to something else to watch or turning off the movie just for now? I have noticed I'm a bit more sensitive since the car accident, and I'm like starting to experience a bit of panic, and I know that what's happening on the TV right now is a part of it. And so like that's something that, a younger version of me Like, I don't know that I would have felt so trapped because I didn't know how to communicate my needs. And then that would have like increased the panic, and I would have had to totally withdraw from situations rather than having the ability to communicate what I need either in the moment or close to the moment that I realize it, and create that safety in community or in different situations. And so, kind of going back to how yeah, these moments, I'm seeing them as opportunities, right? And, another situation, there was like something that I was about to commit to, and I didn't realize how much of a no that it was for me. I realized it was a no, but I didn't realize how much of a no it was. And so I was about to say yes. And then I started feeling like this, it just intense anxiety, like the hour before I was supposed to communicate to that person that I was, that I was in. And so what happened was I was actually creating like a breach in safety or trust with myself and didn't fully realize it. And having that increased awareness or this increased sensitivity with like being more symptomatic is allowing me to recognize those things sooner and course correct in the moment rather than having to do something further down the road when it's more difficult to back out of something I've already committed to. So even though the anxiety can feel frustrating or overwhelming, I think it can also be like a gift because it's in one way a symptom of how much we are neglecting or abandoning ourselves because we're feeling such this lack of safety with ourselves. And so in these moments, especially with the panic, there's like a feeling of a lack of safety. And part of rebuilding that trust is rebuilding the sense of safety with myself by communicating what I need, by restoring safety. And that's creating more trust with myself. I don't know if that made sense at all. But essentially, they're connected. So the safer I feel with myself is directly correlated to like trusting myself to speak up for myself and advocate for what I need and set boundaries. And so when I am able to really like feel that reliance on myself, that is allowing me to alleviate some of this panic, alleviate some of the lack of safety. And this just goes back to the fact that feeling safe in your life and safe in your relationships is an inside job. How safe you feel with other people really has to do with how safe you feel with yourself. Right? That takes me back to like those experiences that I used to be in where I couldn't communicate to a person or to a group that I needed something or was feeling something. And so I would feel very unsafe in those dynamics versus now, like I can just communicate and then, I have really great friends. And so they are like, oh yeah, like even if they don't get it, they still are receptive. They still care about how I feel and they are like, willing to meet me there. And so other ways that we can kind of create safety with ourselves also comes down to knowing how to self-soothe when big emotions come up. Like when you do experience panic, do you know how to help yourself through it? And, that's for some people, they might think, oh, it's like I need to, do breathing exercises or this or that. But there's actually stuff that's a lot like more helpful than that. And for some people, like breathing exercises can be helpful in a moment, but that's not really like creating like long-term regulation. It could be a tool that might help, but there are other things that, I was able to utilize in those moments and tools that I teach clients that tend to be a lot more helpful. And so when you have that like tools or process or methods that work for you, then when you experience big moments of, activation, you feel safer with yourself. You have this trust of like, I got me. I know how to get myself through this. So that allows you to feel safer. And then safety also comes through speaking up and advocating for yourself when you need something or when you feel something, when you're not okay. It comes through setting boundaries and saying no instead of people pleasing, really checking in with like what actually feels best for me right now. And even through small things, which is so important, but I think a lot of people miss these things like am I feeding myself regularly? Am I meeting my basic physical needs? Am I eating enough? Am I eating nutrient-dense foods rather than processed food all the time? Am I staying hydrated, including like electrolytes in your water? Little fun fact, just drinking plain water actually tends to dehydrate you because our water is so lacking in minerals these days due to like the filtration processes. So add some electrolytes in there or, drink some drinks that have more electrolytes. I always add just a little bit of like a high quality sea salt to the water that I have, but you can add, other things. You can add some lemon, drink coconut water, things like that. Anyway, so staying hydrated, getting enough rest, right? Are you sleeping enough? I remember one of my clients, I think it was a couple years ago now that she first started working with me. And she was one of the most anxious clients I had worked with at that time. And I was like, okay, hold on. What is going on? Like there's more here. And we kind of unpacked like, are you meeting your basic needs? And she was like, not sleeping. She was intermittent fasting, which by the way, I don't recommend fasting at all if you are someone who struggles with anxiety, because fasting essentially puts your body into like fight or flight. And so if you are someone who is already like prone to move in that direction, we really want like predictability of my body knows I'm going to get foods at these times. I'm like getting enough to eat. And again, it's like healthy foods that are, allowing your body to feel like its needs are being met. And related to that, like not doing the no meals and only coffee until 3 p.m. thing. No, 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 that is not cute. Like we need to enter our grown woman era where we take care of our physical needs. And it's like it's not cute, it's not funny. You're only hurting yourself, and you deserve to feel more regulated in your body. I think, I joke with friends about like if I have a period where I haven't maybe been like as consistent with making sure I'm like eating consistently or sleeping well enough. And then it's like the first day, I'm like, I got really good sleep. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm back on like making sure I'm eating consistently. And I've like meal prepped some things. So I have food, even though I'm maybe going from one thing to the next. It's like, wow, I feel amazing. This is crazy how just getting sleep and eating enough food really makes you feel so much better. So can't stress those things enough. And if you struggle with anxiety, sending yourself on that blood sugar roller coaster by not eating meals consistently throughout the day, by doing like the coffee and not eating until 3 p.m. thing, that is one of the first things that I would just go ahead and fix because it's one of the things that is most within your control. And it truly does make a difference in how resilient you are towards the stressors in your life. So that client that I mentioned, when we started getting her like eating more, sleeping better, she was getting triggered way less often. And when she would get triggered, it was like, okay, maybe it's like a 6 or a 7 rather than a 10. So it makes a huge difference and it really helps improve your ability to like not let the trigger totally spin you out if you are just taking care of your basic needs. So, if you are a successful woman and you want to become more secure in a relationship, you want to attract healthier, emotionally available men, and you don't want to feel like your dating life is riddled with so much anxiety, then I would recommend applying for my one-on-one program, Attachment Alchemy. Some of the things that we cover in this program are helping you feel more confident in dating and stop overthinking every interaction you have with, guys that you're seeing or maybe the relationship that you're, entering, to stop attaching so quickly and instead feel grounded and secure in the early stages of dating, to be able to recognize when your anxiety is talking versus when your intuition is telling you what to do or telling you that you're in the wrong connection. And also, you'll learn how to communicate in a way that helps draw your partner closer rather than pushing them away or overwhelming them. So, these are just some of the things that we cover in Attachment Alchemy, my signature one on one attachment healing program. And This is where you get all the practical dating support as well as the somatic nervous system work to help you feel more grounded in relationships and dating instead of anxious or secure. And you can apply via the link in my show notes. You can also read more. I think I have a landing page there. You can read some testimonials. You can also listen back through a few episodes I have on here of client testimonials. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at Emily A. Deeney with your specific question. All right, that is all that I have for you guys today. Oh, and you know what? I do have one more recommendation. I have a free resource. I'll put that in the show notes as well. That is one method that I teach clients to self-soothe. So it's kind of like giving you a little bit of a taste of an approach that you maybe might not have tried before. That may be really helpful for you, or just giving you some different ways to think about self-soothing. So that is in my securely attached free training. I'll put that in the show notes as well. All right, you guys, wishing you lots of luck and love on your journey towards becoming more secure. Until next time.